White-haired and weathered by time, I, Eleanor Johnson, have finally found the courage to unveil my truth. This tranquility you witness wasn't always mine to claim. There existed an era when my inner landscape resembled a barren, desolate plain, devastated by burdens from a history that required decades to fully comprehend.
I want to pause for a moment. If you feel the love and are still listening to my story, please subscribe and hit the like button on the Grandparents Memories channel to show your support. Thank you so much.
My formative years unfolded against a backdrop of expansive rural landscapes, where the soil received tender cultivation, where golden light bathed the hillsides at twilight, and daybreaks resonated with avian melodies and bovine calls. To external observers, our homestead appeared as an idyllic sanctuary of uncomplicated harmony. Yet within our dwelling existed an element discordant with the surrounding splendor, a persistent darkness, an unseen burden I shouldered for countless seasons, without the vocabulary to articulate it. Thomas Johnson, my father, embodied stoicism and severity, communicating sparingly. While he never resorted to physical aggression, his utterances and his prolonged silences carried a heaviness that suffocated my spirit. His authority extended to every aspect of our existence, determining our waking hours, dietary choices, and opportunities for expression. Community members regarded him as an industrious, respected figure, but in my experience, he represented an overwhelming presence, someone whose behavior blurred the boundaries between affection and intimidation. From a young age, I felt something strange in the way he looked at me, how his presence seemed to spread throughout the house, throughout my own body. I couldn't explain it. I just felt the discomfort living inside me like an itch that wouldn't go away, like a shiver that made no sense. But I was just a girl, and in those days, girls didn't question their fathers. They simply obeyed. My refuge was the cows. I always liked staying in the barn where the smell of hay calmed me, and the animals' eyes seemed to understand my soul better than any human. I spent hours there talking to them as if they could answer me. Among them, I felt safe, away from my father's gaze, away from the silence that suffocated me. But his shadow was never far away. It always found a way to hover over me, to remind me that I wasn't my own person. This, I would only understand years later. Sunflower Ranch was a place of sounds, the wind shaking the trees, animals calling to each other, my mother Sarah singing softly while preparing dinner. But sometimes, amid all this, a silence would settle in, a thick silence that I felt tightening my chest. This silence came from my father. He was never a man of affection, never picked me up, never said he loved me. But there were gestures, looks, subtle touches that I couldn't decipher. I had no words to express it, but I felt something was wrong when he entered my room at night to see if I was already asleep, when his gaze lingered too long on me, when he ran his hand through my hair, and I felt a shiver that wasn't of comfort. The ranch functioned like a clock. We woke before sunrise, had coffee in silence, and went about our tasks. My mother was too busy to notice anything. To her, my father was a good man, a tireless worker, and I was just a child, and children weren't taken seriously. The first time I felt real fear, the kind that freezes your spine, was on a stormy night. Thunder cut across the sky, and I curled up in bed, squeezing my eyes shut. That's when I heard my father's heavy footsteps approaching my room. I lay motionless, pretending to sleep. He sat on the edge of the bed and for a long time just sat there, saying nothing, just breathing. The silence was so heavy, It nearly drowned me. I knew there was something in that moment that wasn't right, but I had no way to scream, no way to run. So I remained there, pretending to sleep, waiting for him to leave. And he did, but the silence he left behind stayed with me, following me for many years. The fear that grew inside me wasn't obvious. It wasn't like the fear of a wild animal or a fire. It was something more subtle, more stealthy, something that infiltrated the small moments of the day, that hid in gestures that seemed ordinary. I loved my father, or at least I thought I did. He was the only father I knew, and that's how it was supposed to be, right? What I felt couldn't be wrong because no one ever said it was. But then, why did it hurt so much? I avoided being alone with him, but that wasn't always possible. There was always a moment when my mother went out to tend the vegetable garden, when the farmhands went to rest, and it was just the two of us. He never touched me violently, never hurt me in a visible way, but his gestures were like a razor wire passing over my skin. They made no sound but cut deep. Once, while milking one of the cows, I felt his shadow behind me. He didn't say anything, just stood there watching. My heart was beating so hard I thought he would hear it. "You're becoming a young woman," he finally said. It was the first time he had said something like that, and something inside me broke. I didn't know why, but my entire body went cold. I fled into the barn where the cows were waiting for me. I buried my face in one of them, seeking the warmth of her body, the smell of hay. Anything that would make me forget that moment. Tears came without warning, and I let them fall because in that instant, I understood that what I felt wasn't just fear. It was a warning. Something inside me was saying that the shadows around me were growing darker. Sunflower Ranch had always been my home, but it wasn't always my refuge. There was a time when I ran barefoot through the fields, smelling the damp earth after the rain, hearing the mooing of cows in the distance, thinking of nothing beyond the present moment. But those days became increasingly distant, like a dream that crumbles upon waking. Now, my refuge was the barn, while the house became heavy, suffocating, with a silence that seemed to lurk in the corners. The barn offered me a kind of comfort I couldn't find anywhere else. The cows didn't talk, but they listened. They didn't judge me, didn't look at me in a way that made me want to disappear. They were just there, large, calm, alive. My mother used to call me a strange girl for preferring to be among the animals. But the truth is that over time, she herself stopped being present. Her absence wasn't physical. She was there every day preparing food, washing clothes, fulfilling the ranch tasks. But something inside her seemed to have gone out. When I was little, I still remember her laughter echoing through the kitchen, her eyes shining when talking about simple things like the cake she was going to make on Sunday, or a story about when she was a girl. But that was before the long nights, before the persistent cough that wouldn't go away, before life stole from her any trace of joy. Mom, she was always tired, too tired to notice me, to perceive the moments when I would shrink away, to see how I avoided certain situations. Sometimes I wanted to tell her, wanted to say there was something inside me that made me want to scream and run far away. But she already had too many worries, and I learned to keep quiet. That's why I started sleeping in the barn. If anyone asks, say you're taking care of Daisy, I would tell myself. And indeed, Daisy was old, one of the oldest cows on the ranch. Her eyes seemed to carry the weight of years, as if she understood what was happening to me. I would curl up in the hay, listening to the animals breathing, feeling their warmth around me. And there, for a few hours, I pretended I was safe. But the truth was that safety was just an illusion, and I knew I couldn't hide forever. The worst time of day was when the sun began to disappear behind the hills. In the morning, the ranch work distracted me, carrying buckets, feeding the animals, helping in the kitchen. All this filled the hours. But when night fell, there were no more tasks, no escape, just the silence and footsteps in the hallway. I knew that at some point I would hear the creaking of wood, the shadow moving through the house. My body learned before my mind. When the footsteps approached, my muscles hardened, my breathing became short, my heart seemed to want to escape from my chest. I never knew what to expect. Sometimes he would just stand there at the door frame. Other times he would say something simple, like asking if I was already asleep. But the way the words came out of his mouth made me want to dig a hole and bury myself inside. One night it was raining hard. I was under the blanket, looking at the window, trying to count the drops running down the glass to keep my mind occupied. That's when I heard the footsteps. I held my breath. He stopped at the door. He didn't open it, didn't call out, just stood there waiting. Thunder cut across the sky, and in the flash, I saw the shadow projected on the hallway floor, a presence that didn't move, but also didn't go away. The rain continued beating on the roof like a warning. Then, after what seemed like an eternity, the footsteps moved away. I waited a few more minutes before releasing the air trapped in my chest. My body was still trembling when I pulled the blanket over my head, as if the thin fabric could protect me from something much bigger than myself. It was on that night that I decided I couldn't continue like this anymore. I didn't know exactly what to do or where to run, but something inside me screamed that I needed to get out of that silence before it swallowed me completely. "But he's your father." This phrase echoed in my mind every time I tried to understand what I felt. I had always heard that fathers love their children, that they do what's best for them. But then why was the love I felt for my father so confusing? Why, instead of feeling protected, did I feel fear? When I was little, I wanted to be like the other girls who ran into their father's arms without hesitation. But over time, I learned that the affection I desired never came. In its place was a gaze too heavy, a presence that made me want to disappear. There was a kind of game he liked to play. It was subtle, imperceptible to anyone from outside. Small comments, touches that seemed accidental, conversations that seemed normal, but carried something more, something that made me shrink inside. And I pretended not to see. I smiled when they expected me to smile. I said, "Yes, sir," and obeyed. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Love shouldn't be like this. I felt guilty for thinking this. After all, he never really hurt me, right? At least not in a way that could be seen, not in a way that could be explained. But then, why did my entire body tell me to run? The truth is that pain doesn't always have to be physical. Sometimes it settles in a silent way, creating roots inside us until it makes us doubt our own reality. And I was tired of doubting. It was at this moment that I knew something needed to change. I just didn't know how yet. But for the first time, I was willing to find out. I always knew something was wrong, but it was only when the days began to weigh on my shoulders that I realized how deeply my father's shadow had settled into my life. Sunflower Ranch was big, but not big enough to hide forever. I tried to keep busy, doing tasks that would keep me away from him. I helped my mother in the kitchen, though she was always absorbed, her eyes tired, her thoughts distant. I worked in the barn for longer than necessary, always inventing some excuse not to return home early. But none of this was enough. There were moments when he caught me off guard. Small moments that would seem harmless to anyone from outside, but that for me were like an invisible alert. Like when he put his hand on my shoulder, but his palm lingered there too long. Or when his eyes remained fixed on me in a way that wasn't the look of a father for a daughter. And I never knew when this would happen. Sometimes the day would pass without me noticing his presence. At others, he would appear out of nowhere with that silent way of someone who was always watching. He liked to play with my fear, not with words or explicit gestures, but with his mere existence. It was on one of these days that I realized I couldn't continue pretending nothing was happening. I was milking Daisy in the barn when I heard the footsteps behind me. My heart raced before I even turned around. "You're becoming a young woman," he said, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. My body froze. That phrase, said like that in the middle of a barn, carried a weight I couldn't name. I wanted to scream, wanted to ask why he said these things, why he looked at me that way. But my mouth was dry, and my voice simply didn't come out. It was Daisy who saved me. She moved restlessly, shaking her head and pulling me back to reality. "I have to finish here," I mumbled, turning my attention back to the bucket. He stood there for a few more seconds, and I held firm, waiting for him to leave. When I finally heard his footsteps moving away, I let out a long sigh and allowed myself to tremble. The fear was growing, and along with it, something new was also being born inside me. Revolt. The winds of Sunflower Ranch always brought with them a smell of renewal. After a storm, the smell of wet earth invaded everything, as if nature were cleaning away the sins that men left behind. But no matter how much it rained, nothing could wash away what I felt inside. My mother was getting worse. Her cough was now constant, a dry sound that echoed through the house in the early morning, mixing with the sound of the winds howling outside. She was growing weaker, her shoulders thin, her gaze always lost. She didn't know what was happening to me, or perhaps she did, but didn't have the strength to deal with it. One night, I was in the kitchen helping to cut vegetables for dinner when she stopped beside me and held my hand. It was the first time in a long time that I felt her touch. "Are you all right, daughter?" she asked, her voice hoarse, tired. I wanted so much to tell the truth, wanted so much to scream, to tell everything, to beg her to take me away from there. But looking into her eyes, I saw the exhaustion, saw a woman who had already fought too much in life and who now could barely fight for herself. So I smiled. "I am, Mom." She let out a sigh and nodded, returning to chopping vegetables with trembling hands. In that moment, I understood. If someone was going to save me, it wouldn't be her. I would have to do it myself. I began to spend more time than ever in the barn. The smell of hay, the warmth of the animals, all of it made me feel that there was still something pure in the world. Daisy, in particular, seemed to sense what was happening to me. When I arrived there after a bad day, she would look at me in a profound way, as if to say, "I see you. I know." Sometimes I would talk to her. "Do you think I'm wrong to feel afraid?" I asked one afternoon, leaning my forehead against her warm neck.
I want to pause for a moment. If you feel the love and are still listening to my story, please subscribe and hit the like button on the Grandparents Memories channel to show your support. Thank you so much.
Daisy just breathed deeply, and that was answer enough. But running to the barn wasn't a solution. One night, When I was returning to the house after hiding there for too long, I saw my father's silhouette on the porch. He was sitting in his rocking chair, smoking a cigarette, watching me. My legs became heavy. I tried to enter without making noise, but he called my name. "What are you running from?" he asked, and the tone of his voice made me feel a shiver down my spine. "Nothing," I responded too quickly. He smiled. It was a small smile, almost invisible, but one that carried a weight I didn't want to understand. "Girls who spend too much time alone end up thinking foolish things," he said, releasing the smoke slowly. "Are you sure you don't have anything to tell me?" Bile rose in my throat. "I was just taking care of the animals," I mumbled, and entered the house before he could say anything else. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of what was happening. There were no more doubts. The truth was there, naked and cruel. He knew I was afraid, and he liked it. I always heard that childhood is the happiest period of life, but mine was like cracked glass that accumulated more fractures each day, until one day it broke completely. I began to avoid the house as much as possible. I would hide in the barn before sunrise and only return when my mother called me for dinner. But no matter how much I tried to hide, there was no way to run forever. My father's shadow always found me. One afternoon I was brushing Daisy when I heard his voice behind me. "You really like these animals, don't you?" My body stiffened. I didn't need to look to know he was leaning against the doorframe, watching me. "Yes," I answered softly. "They're simple creatures. They don't complicate things, unlike people." I continued brushing Daisy's coat, feeling her strong pulse under my hand. "You're a smart girl," he continued with that tone that always made me want to disappear. "But you have to learn to trust your father. The world out there isn't a safe place." I wanted to say that what wasn't safe was inside my own home, but I just swallowed the words and continued. He stayed there a while longer, as if waiting for me to say something. But I didn't. And when he left, my breathing came out trembling. Daisy turned her head to me, and in that calm, dark gaze, I saw something that no one else gave me. Safety. It was there that I decided I needed to leave. It wasn't a choice. It was survival. My mother got worse. Her cough was no longer just a nighttime annoyance. Now she woke up sweating, with sunken eyes, and could barely stay on her feet throughout the day. I watched her one morning as she tried to cut an onion, and her hands were shaking so much she could barely hold the knife. "Mom," I began hesitantly. She sighed as if she knew what I was going to say. "Eleanor, I know you want to tell me something." Her voice came out weak. "But my daughter, there are things we simply have to endure." My stomach turned. She knew. Maybe she didn't know the details. Maybe she had never seen anything concrete. But somehow she knew, and had decided not to see. My eyes filled with tears, but I swallowed it all. I couldn't cry. I couldn't weaken. She wasn't going to save me. If I wanted to get out of that hole, it would have to be with my own legs. Later that same night, when I went to the barn, I knelt beside Daisy and buried my face in her soft coat. "I'm leaving," I whispered to her, as if I needed to say it out loud to believe it. "I need to go." The warmth of the cow against my face was the only response I received. But for me, it was enough. Courage doesn't arise suddenly. It builds slowly, like a storm forming on the horizon. And my storm was ready to break. I began to plan. I didn't know where I would go, but I knew I needed to leave. I waited for the right moment. I waited for my mother to be asleep. Waited for my father to go to Oakville to take care of some business. Then I ran to the barn, grabbed a small bag with some clothes, and looked at Daisy one last time. "Thank you," I whispered, feeling the tears burning my eyes. She just chewed slowly, watching me as if she knew I was leaving. I took a deep breath and ran. My legs were trembling, my heart beating against my ribs like an erratic drum. But I didn't stop. I ran all the way to the road, and for the first time in my life, I was leaving Sunflower Ranch behind. Not as a frightened girl, but as someone who had finally understood she deserved to be free. I ran until I felt my legs could take no more, until my lungs begged for air. The dirt road stretched out before me, and each step I took seemed to take me away from everything that suffocated me. But the fear didn't leave my chest. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't have a plan, money, or anyone waiting for me. I just knew I couldn't stay there anymore. Sunflower Ranch was left behind, but my father's shadow still seemed to hover over me. His gaze, his words, his silent control. Everything was still inside me, as if he had planted invisible claws in my soul. The wind cut across my face, and the stars shone above me, indifferent to what I felt. For a moment, I wondered if I was doing the right thing. What if out there was worse? What if there was no one to help me? But then, I thought of my mother, of the way she held my hand, of the way she chose not to see me. No one would come to save me, so I kept walking. After a while, I spotted a small house in the distance. It wasn't much bigger than a shed, and a faint light shone in the window. My stomach growled with hunger, and my feet ached. So, I decided to take a chance. I knocked on the door hesitantly. An older woman opened it. She was elderly, with disheveled white hair and hard eyes accustomed to life's harshness. She analyzed me for a long time before asking, "What do you want, girl?" I thought about lying, saying I was lost, but something inside me prevented me. "I need a place to stay." My voice came out firmer than I expected. She observed me a bit more, and then opened the door. "Come in." Her name was Martha Wilson. She lived alone on a piece of land that wasn't exactly a ranch, but still had some chickens, an old dog, and a vegetable garden. She didn't ask anything about me that night, just put a bowl of chicken soup in front of me and told me to eat. And I ate with the hunger of someone who hadn't fed themselves in years, because in a way, that's exactly what it was. When I finished, she pointed to a mattress in the corner of the room. "You can sleep there." I lay down, and for the first time in a long time, I fell asleep without fear. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and fresh bread. "Take this," she said, extending a buttermilk biscuit. I took it without hesitation, and it was only when the first bite melted in my mouth that I realized there was something new inside me. Hope. Martha didn't ask me questions until the third day. "You ran away from home," she said without beating around the bush while putting water on to boil. I stopped chewing. She looked at me over her glasses. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. I just want to know if you plan to go back." My heart raced. "No," I answered without hesitation. She nodded as if she already knew. "Then what are you going to do now?" That was the question I had been avoiding asking myself. I didn't know. I just knew that going back wasn't an option. Martha sighed and pointed to the yard. "If you want to stay for a while, you can help me in the vegetable garden. I can't give you much, but at least you'll have a roof and food." I looked at her, surprised. "Why?" She shrugged. "Because one day, I ran away too. My eyes widened, but she didn't say anything more. So, without saying anything either, I picked up a garden hoe and went to the yard. With each strike in the earth, with each plant I watered, I felt as if I were rebuilding something inside me. I still didn't know what I would do, but for the first time, I didn't feel completely lost. The seasons passed. Over time, I created a routine in that new life. I helped Martha in the vegetable garden, learned to make bread, began to understand how life worked away from Sunflower Ranch, away from my father. And each day, I felt that the weight I carried was beginning to diminish. But the past doesn't disappear so easily. One afternoon, while returning from the farmer's market where Martha sold vegetables, I saw a man on the road. My heart stopped. It was my father. He was thinner, more aged, but those eyes still carried the same weight that pursued me in nightmares. I froze. He saw me and smiled. "Eleanor." My body wanted to run. My legs wanted to take me far away. But this time, I didn't give in to fear. I took a deep breath and forced myself to look at him. "What do you want?" I asked with a firmness I never thought I would have. He tilted his head, surprised. "You ran away, but you can't run forever."
I want to pause for a moment. If you feel the love and are still listening to my story, please subscribe and hit the like button on the Grandparents Memories channel to show your support. Thank you so much.
The anger inside me bubbled up. "I'm not running." My voice didn't tremble. "I'm living." His smile disappeared. "Your mother is sick." My heart ached, but not enough to make me go back. He realized it. "You're going to leave me alone to take care of her?" That was his manipulation. It always had been. But I was no longer that frightened girl. "You never took care of anyone." My voice came out cold. "I'm never going back." We stared at each other for what seemed like an eternity. Then he walked away, and when he disappeared over the horizon, I realized something. I had won. Not with shouts, not with fighting, but simply by being free. I didn't go back home. I didn't go see my mother. I didn't go find out if my father was still looking for me. Deep down, a part of me wanted to see her, wanted to know if she was okay. But I knew that if I set foot on that ranch again, I would never leave. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into seasons. Life beside Martha brought me a peace I had never experienced. For the first time, I felt that my body belonged to me. There were no heavy gazes pursuing me, no suffocating silences swallowing me. But there was still something inside me that needed to be resolved. Although the passing days remained constant, an internal shift had occurred within me. A newfound lightness permeated my being, anchoring me in the present moment. Smiles came more readily, and my laughter, genuine and uninhibited, emerged without concern for who might hear. For the initial time in memory, existence presented itself as something precious to experience. The scars remained, and always would, but I discovered their true significance, not as symbols of vulnerability, but as evidence of triumphs in personal battles. And triumph I had. Following 2 years since my departure, I found myself seated on Martha's veranda, observing the sun's descent. The gentle late-day breeze brushed against my skin, bringing with it a serenity I hadn't experienced in countless seasons. Employment at Sunflower County Library provided me with modest but meaningful independence. I accumulated savings while envisioning possibilities previously unimaginable. Though imperfect, this life belonged uniquely to me, a sufficiency I cherished. Gazing toward the distant horizon, my thoughts drifted to my former self, that frightened child seeking refuge in the barn, fleeing from incomprehensible threats. Could I speak to her now? I would assure her of her eventual survival and victory, that courage rather than fear would ultimately define her journey as she emerged from darkness into light. A private smile formed as I briefly closed my eyes, absorbing the sound of wind traversing through surrounding trees. I had chosen liberation, never once glancing backward. If my narrative resonated with you, please share its impact. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Pass this story to someone who might benefit from hearing it, and consider subscribing to our channel for additional inspiring and transformative accounts. Your continued engagement is deeply valued. Dear esteemed guests and dear friends, I am Eleanor Johnson, with silver white hair and the wrinkles of time, and I would like to express my deepest gratitude to all of you for taking the time to listen to my life story. Every moment you share with me is a priceless gift that I truly cherish. My life, from a frightened little girl hiding in a barn to the free woman I am today, is not just a story of pain but a testament to the power of hope and courage. I want to share with you this message. No matter how overwhelming the darkness may seem, light will always exist if we are brave enough to seek it. No one has the right to take away our worth and dignity. Sometimes, the hardest step is the first one toward freedom. I believe that each of us carries our own wounds, but it is those very wounds that teach us how to love, how to empathize, and how to live a fuller life. Do not let pain define you. Let it be the stepping stone that leads you to a better place. I would like to extend a special thanks to the founder of the Grandparent's Memories channel for inviting me to share my story. Through your vision and dedication, stories like mine have the chance to be heard and to reach the hearts of those who need them most. If my story has touched your heart, please consider subscribing to Grandparent's Memories and leaving a like on this video. Every subscription, every like, is a motivation for us to continue sharing meaningful stories and valuable lessons from past generations. Please stay tuned for more stories on our channel, a place where the past is told not only to be remembered but to be learned from and to inspire growth. Every memory is a gift, and we wish to share these gifts with all of you. Once again, thank you for listening. I am Eleanor Johnson, and this is my story.